just wanted to end with a few words of my own. This session is about people before profit. And we have a system at the moment which governs so much of the world, which puts profit ahead of the needs, the aspirations, and even the lives of human beings. And I'll give you an example from my own country recently. A few months ago, in Kensington, the richest borough of London, one of the richest cities of one of the richest countries that has ever existed, dozens of working class people burned to death in their homes in Grenfell Tower. For years, the inhabitants of that tower, working class people, many from minority backgrounds, many of them migrants, they had warned that unless urgent action was taken, there would be a calamity and people would die. And they weren't listened to. They were ignored because in Britain, as in many other countries, working class people all too often are marginalised and demonised and certainly not listened to. And what they warned about happened. And that tower burned and dozens of them died. Now, cladding or insulation had been chosen across that tower block, which was flammable because it was cheaper. It was more expensive to get non-flammable cladding. And so when the fire started, it quickly spread across the whole building, turning it into a giant burning torch. In a country where fire regulations hadn't been implemented because it was red tape, where there wasn't water sprinklers because it was too expensive. What happened in Grenfell Tower is a story of a social and economic order which is bankrupt, which is unjust, which is cruel, which is unsustainable, and which is going to have to end. Because we've seen in Britain the consequences. We've seen the consequences. Britain is one of the richest countries on earth, and yet in Britain, hundreds of thousands of people are driven to charities, to food banks, to satisfy the most basic human need of all, other than breathing and drinking water, to eat. 300,000 of them kids every year. Where the housing isn't built, where hundreds of thousands of families wait on social housing waiting lists, where 1 in 4 kids grow up in an overcrowded home in London, damaging their health, their education, their well-being, not just their prospects, but the prospects of the country with them. Where young people are punished for daring to dream for an education, a university education, saddled with tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt. Where workers are deprived of the most basic rights. In a country where most people in poverty are in work, earning their poverty every single day. Where young people get text messages at 6 o'clock in the morning telling them if they have any work that day. A return to a supposedly bygone era where dock workers marched to the yard and they stuck their hands up, hoping to get work, often to go home disappointed. No pensions, no paid sick leave, forget about paid maternity leave. The constant stripping away of rights that our ancestors fought for at such cost and at such sacrifice. It is a country where the bankers plunged us into a terrible disaster and carried on paying more bonuses than every country in the European Union put together. Not lending to small businesses, choking off recovery from a disaster they caused. Where billions of pounds are lost by tax dodgers and tax avoiders, while social security is stripped away from people who are constantly punished. Where the state will rescue the powerful and give them tens of billions of pounds with no questions asked, with nothing in return, whilst the pathetic tiny amount of support that unemployed people and low-paid workers get from the state is stripped away or taken away altogether. Socialism for the rich, capitalism for the poor. And we've seen what happens when you attack the trade union movement, our biggest democratic movement, and I'm glad to be on the stage with an inspiring, fantastic General Secretary of Unison, Dave Prentice. Give him a big round of applause, because he showed great leadership in Britain, standing up for public sector workers who have faced a real terms pay cut, nurses, teachers, care workers, the pillar of our community, who have suffered pay cut after pay cut after pay cut. And what does it mean? It means more and more people driven into debt. It means billions of pounds on social security to top up people's wages. It means people in poverty. Everyone suffers as a consequence of the attack on our greatest democratic movement. But what I would say is that politics of hope is breaking out. We've seen the politics of despair, of treating injustice like the weather. You can complain about it raining, nothing you can do about it. You grit your teeth, you take your blows, you get on with your life. There is no alternative. That's coming to an end. The politics of fear, of the Donald Trumps, the Nigel Farages, the Marine Le Pens. Don't be angry with the bankers or the tax dodgers or the poverty-paying bosses. Blame your neighbor instead. Blame the other people who are struggling. Blame the immigrant. Blame the unemployed person. Blame the Muslim. Blame anyone but the powerful vested interests who are responsible for the mess that we're in. And what we've learned in the particularly last 2 years, is people don't want tinkering with the system. They don't want mild changes. The whole system is bankrupt, and instead of tinkering with that system, we have to replace it with an entirely new society, one that is based on putting people before profit. And we've seen across Europe social democratic parties, like in Germany, like in the Netherlands, like in Spain, like in Greece, like across the whole of the European continent, who are in crisis. Many of them, in the case of the Netherlands, on 7%, because they're not offering a genuine alternative, and they're leaving a vacuum that the xenophobic anti-immigrant right are instead filling, saying, we offer genuine radical change, they're part of the system. And what we've learned in Britain, and we're not in power yet, but we're a lot closer to power than we were, and far closer to power than most social democratic parties in Europe, is by offering radical alternative, demanding the rich pay their taxes, hiking taxes on the rich, on big business, investing in public services, abolishing student debt, bringing our utilities back under the democratic control of our people, introducing proper workers' rights, by offering that genuine alternative, not capitulating to the right, not tinkering, that millions of people will be inspired, and I hope in the coming months or the coming years, as our government continues to collapse, we will have a genuine socialist government in Britain which can offer a genuine alternative to people, not just there, but across Europe. But just to wrap up, we know as trade unionists that the only way we get change is not by waiting for the goodwill and generosity and the charity of the powerful, but by the struggle and sacrifice of people from below. Whether it be the early trade unionists who fought for the rights of working people, whether it be those who fought for democracy, whether it be the suffragettes who are now lauded as secular saints, but in their time were hated and reviled as anarchists and terrorists, dragged from demonstrations, thrown into dirty cells with tubes forced down their noses, whether it be the civil rights movement of Martin Luther King and those who struggled alongside him, whether it be those who fought for public health care and a welfare state, whether it be those who fought racism and homophobia and sexism and transphobia. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And that includes your ancestors. It includes people in this room, your mothers, your fathers, your grandmothers, and your grandfathers before us. And we owe it to them to not just defend the rights and freedoms that they won, which are often taken away without even a murmur, but to continue their fight with that struggle passed on like a baton from generation to generation. They did it by standing with determination, resilience, and courage. And wherever we are, in Latin America, the Arab world, in Africa, Australasia, in Europe, in the Americas, millions of people now are standing in solidarity, just like their ancestors did, to fight for a world that puts people before profit. That is our historic mission, and together, united, we will overcome not just the Donald Trumps and the Nigel Farages, but a rotten and bankrupt and unjust system that punishes people, the majority, for the crimes of those at the top. And together we will build that new society that puts needs and aspirations ahead of the profits of those at the top. So good luck with the rest of conference, and solidarity, and a big round of applause for the panel.